Definitely will not be supporting this bill. We've seen that, there was talk here about a strong economy, but after this budget, households across Ireland are going to be 2% worse off. But the worst part of this is that it's going to be there's still 1 in 5 people are in low pay in Ireland. We're kind of lauded across the world as being one of the richest countries in Europe, but there's 1 in 5, and this is going on for 2 decades now, that there's 1 in 5 people are in low pay, and that's figures from the European Commission. The tax changes in this bill do very, very little for ordinary families, and we see that there was no targeted measures to reduce energy costs, there was no targeted measures to reduce the cost of living costs. The only positive change we can see in the personal tax code is made to the personal tax code is the change to the raise to the 2% ceiling on the USC on account of the 65-cent increases to the hourly rate of the national minimum wage, as was proposed by the Low Pay Commission, and that was the Labour Party that brought that in. But however, the lack of indexation means that nothing but effective tax rises next year for ordinary workers. But this, I suppose, this paltry tax rise for ordinary workers was at the expense of the 9% VAT cut that was given out to fast food restaurants. And Senator McDougall referenced there in Sligo that nowhere's open until after 5 o'clock. And I would argue that the reason for that is because people have no money in their pockets to spend before 5 o'clock, and also that people in hospitality service are one of the low-paid workers in our economy. So, and we know that this tax cut, I think it's scandalous, that 9% tax cut, and it will never whatsoever, and this will not be passed on to workers, and it's not going to be passed on to consumers. It's an expensive tax break for a sector that is already added jobs, and where there are more openings than closures actually taking place, when that's been researched right across the country. So it's a bad policy, and no one seems to agree with it besides the Taoiseach and the restaurant lobby. The Minister could have done what we in the Labour Party suggested and established a specialist body to support the industry to become sustainable and consider reforming and modernising the commercial rate system. And we have been raising this for years about this. But instead, this pre-election promise to restaurant lobbyists leaves us with this bizarre policy change that it was going to take hundreds of millions out of the exchequer that we can ill afford. And it's the same about the 9% VAT cut on apartments. It shows that there's no evidence that this is going to increase housing supply, and there's actually no conditions attached to it. There's no conditions that developers have to build affordable housing if they're going to avail of this tax cut. There's no evidence that it's going to actually boost housing supply, and there was nothing in the budget that gave us any hope really about housing policy, about a radical reset in housing policy. But we got this 9% VAT cut. It can never be justified after, and it was like a gift to developers and big lobbyist groups. So absolutely, this is a big sprawling bill, and we could talk more about it, and it's going to be a lot more to say. But these are 2 areas that the flagship policies in this bill, the 9% VAT cut to big property developers and the 9% cut to the restaurant industry, is just something that we can simply, the government have got it wrong, and we will definitely not be supporting it.